Hey fellow Cosmic Hobbyists, welcome back. Today's build's a little bit different for me. This one mixes some real history with future racing and a whole lot of styrene. So let's take a look at what I'm going to be working on. These photos are from a dirt super modified racing team that was owned by my wife's grandfather, H.O. Taylor, who's 97 years old and a World War II veteran. They raced from the late 1950s to the 1980s and ran some pretty big tracks like the Little 500 in Indiana. When my wife and I recently moved back from Reno, we bought and moved into her grandparents' home here in Michigan. During that time, I got to hear a lot of his racing stories, and after a while, I realized I couldn't not build something inspired by that team. So today, we're going to imagine just what that team might look like in a CQH Aerospace universe. It's a lot like NASCAR, if the cars were like little spaceships that raced around the solar system at completely ridiculous speeds. So with that in mind, let's get started. So the construction of this, I had an idea of making a hauler, kind of like this picture right here, where either I would have a big spaceship that would be the hauler, and it'd carry the little racer on its back, or maybe somewhere underneath, and then it would get dropped down to a planet surface or detach out in space. And there'd be an engine room in the back here, and then there'd either be living quarters, something like that, along the bottom or along the same level as the engine room, and of course a bridge. I think I'll use this as the basis of my construction process. I can't wait to show you guys what we have going on. So let's get going. As usual, I started with a solid core section, which was 2 pieces of 1x2 pine cut to length and glued together with standard wood glue. Once the glue set, I pulled the clamps off and began laminating the sides with styrene. I used super glue for that step. It sets fast, which is nice when you want to keep building and not wait for epoxy to cure. After my core was built, I moved on to the main body section. This got the same treatment as all my other builds. I used 40 thousandths styrene from the main panels for strength and 30 thousandths for many of the other spots. Styrene is quite forgiving, and you'll see many other builders using this for the base of their ships, vehicles, and buildings. It's super easy to glue together. You can either use a store-bought product like Tamiya Extra Thin, for instance, or I like to use Weld-On 3, which I like to buy by the quart and just decant it into my old glue bottle. Here you can see I'm starting to rough out the basic shape of this craft. The large aft or tail area will be where I'll have a combination of where the engines will attach and the engine room that controls them. This engine room will also double as the racing repair shop. The front nose section is starting to look like it wants to have a taper to it as well. I say that it looks like it wants to because the ship can end up changing its mind at any time during construction. When this happens, it often comes with a lot more cutting and gluing on my end. I also started to roughen the bottom section that will contain the USB-C connector for the lights. And speaking of engines, I fired up Tinkercad to modify my standard Jupiter-class ion engine. Since the ship is being built in 1/72nd scale, I needed to make them a bit bigger to add more depth. And I felt having a deeper engine well would also give the effect of making them look like they're glowing a bit more from deep within. Once I had these engines modified for the ship, I printed them on my Anycubic Photon 3D printer. I'm always amazed at how detailed these printers can make things. When I was young, I never would have thought a device like this would exist outside of a sci-fi show, and now here it is on a sci-fi show. With the engines glued onto a custom piece of styrene, I attached them to the back of the ship's structure. Even with a heavier wooden core towards the front, these engines definitely made the ship tail heavy. With the engines in place, now was a good time to get some rooms made for the crew. I decided I would make 2 bunk rooms, a lounge, captain's quarters, a bridge, and an engine room that also doubles as a repair shop. I digitally kitbashed all these in Tinkercad as well, and 3D printed them in one piece. In retrospect, I probably wouldn't do it that way again. It makes painting all the small details too difficult. For future builds, I'll probably just do a blank room and glue in the painted furniture or technology pieces after the main room itself is painted. And for these guys, for the detailed painting, I started with the engine room. I initially sprayed it with a gray color, but I changed my mind and made the walls in all the rooms white to help brighten the spaces once the lights were on. I also placed a spare engine on a stand that a mechanic is working on to get it ready for the next race. As mentioned earlier, each bedroom space has bunk beds. I also included lockers and a desk. The lounge room has a set of comfy couches that are based on a set we got with our house. These are leather and were a favorite of HO's and have been around for more than 30 years. So why not put them in the lounge area as well? The main quarters has a queen-size bed for the captain. And as you might have guessed, the captain of the ship is actually HO himself. I also added a desk, nightstand, and lockers to that room. For the bridge, I decided to not have anybody in it as the crew was out and about doing other things on the ship. But the bridge itself is very basic, as this isn't a large military vessel and only needs a limited crew. And the race mechanics actually pull double duty as flight engineers. With all the primary crew spaces painted, I also decided to paint safety lines on the large hatch door that goes to the floor of the engine room. This door allows race parts to be brought into the repair shop. One of the fun things I like to do with my builds is to add little Easter eggs. This one is no different. I miniaturized some images to place into the various spaces. A few of them were actual pictures from the original racing team this build is based on, as well as the state park that is across from where we live. That picture actually goes over the bed in the main quarters. The TV in the lounge area also has an image from a NASCAR race that I'll put a minifigure of HO watching his favorite NASCAR driver back on Earth, Kyle Larson. With all the rooms glued in place, I was super excited. I could actually picture how it would look when done, and the ship was no longer so tail-heavy to boot. Before I got too far with the build, I took a quick step back and added a 5-volt USB-C connector to the bottom. This is going to be the way all the lights in the vessel are going to be powered. With the power input where it needed to be, I started closing in the rooms with styrene, making sure to leave a hole for each of the light boxes that go in place in the ceilings. These light boxes were made with 30,000 styrene, with most of them getting reflective aluminum tape on the inside to help stop light leaks and increase downward reflection. This tape is great for this purpose. I've seen a lot of other builders doing the same thing with their builds, and it's super easy to get. You can either get on Amazon or the home stores in the HVAC section. For my lighting, I went with warm white 3-volt LEDs for each of the rooms, and bright white for the bridge and engine rooms, because the proper task lighting is very important. I also used blue LEDs for the engines themselves. I ended up with a mix of 5-volt and 3-volt LEDs, which wasn't a big deal. Since this was all powered off 5-volt USB, I just made sure to use the correct resistor for each of the 3-volt LEDs, which actually came in the package from Amazon with them. I'll put a link below if you want to see the ones I used. For any of my soldered connections, I used heat shrink tubing to prevent any shorts from occurring. I also like to use some kind of wire management inside my ships to keep things neat. For this one, I used small square pieces of styrene tube to run the wires through. Even though it all gets covered up, I like knowing it'll stay in place during rough flights. I also like to think the crew of the ship will be pleased with the small details. With most of the lighting in place, I grabbed some more of the foil tape to seal off the rooms to add light blocking. This will help prevent any random light leaks. I also gave the same light box, LED, and foil tape treatment to the lights for the engine room. Except for this one, there were 4 lights, because the room was so much larger. Everything looked pretty cool with all the foil tape in place. Of course, the racer itself would need a place to park. So I built out a landing pad from styrene sheet. which also helped add some structural integrity to the top. I used Tinkercad again to create a bridge front nose section with 3 windows. While it's kind of hard to see in the finished product, I added a roller type system that in the lore of this ship construction will protect the front windscreens in the event of having to fly through any space debris. We don't want those windows getting busted. If you've ever heard of the concept of the marathon in the middle, this ship is very much at this point in the build. So while you're watching me add various pieces of styrene panels, tubing, and other bits, let me tell you how this ship fits into the CQH Aerospace universe. Earlier I told you about us moving back to Michigan, buying a house for my wife's grandparents, and her grandfather owning a race team, which included racing at some pretty big name tracks. I just knew this would make for a great story to fit in the Cosmic Quest Hobbies universe. Amazingly enough, people will race almost anything they can put a motor or engine into, including cars and lawn chairs. Heck, I've even heard of recliner racing. Racing small ships around the solar system is no different, and this setup is a good case in point. This hauler and the mini racer that is carried on its back are part of the technology that has come from research initially done by CQH Aerospace. A few of the things attributed to them are the ion engines, anti-gravity tech, and deflector arrays to protect spacecraft during deep space flights at high speeds. When CQH Aerospace made this technology available to the public, there was a push by a group to create a planetary racing league. This league would eventually be called the Solar Grand Circuit Racing League, starting with nearly 20 teams. These teams had a mix of Earth-based automotive racers, former military and stunt pilots, as well as a small group of beginners looking to make a name for themselves. In this universe, I imagined one of those teams would be one owned by H.O. Taylor. The first year of the circuit started out kind of small with 9 races at various places like Saturn and Neptune, as well as the Galilean moons around Jupiter. There's even a race in the Martian atmosphere, which has become a popular excursion event for the new interplanetary cruise ships. With CQH Aerospace now selling their basic spaceflight tech to those interested in exploring the solar system, this team purchased a basic ship which was constructed on the same internal superstructure as the Pathfinder research vessel, right down to the Jupiter-class ion engines. More advanced tech like warp drives weren't available yet to the general public. Besides, some of this more serious tech will probably need to be saved for future research and military vessels, because apparently there are a couple of alien species out there in the cosmos that are looking to cause problems. But back to the racing. The hauler itself is pretty cool, but the real stars of this league are the small racers that are single-pilot craft that are unbelievably fast with minimal inertial dampening systems, making them more exciting to watch. They also have a limited supply of fuel for their compressed xenon ion race engines, which means they must use strategy to try and win their races as well. While there are definitely huge racing teams like some of the big NASCAR teams from today, there are also teams that are working their way up with limited resources, which this ship and racer portray. This is just a small group in outer space having a blast and going places no one would have believed just 10 years prior. Wow, this racing league sounds like it'd be a blast to watch. And just think how expensive a couple of those racing engines would cost in the future. But if you look at it this way, at least you wouldn't have to buy tires. Now that you know the story behind this build, it's time to get back to a few things. I 3D printed some windows and added glass to them, which was actually 30 thousandths clear PETG that I purchased from McMaster-Carr. To glue them in place, I used Tester's canopy glue, which did a great job with holding them in position. I have heard that you can use foam-safe superglue as well for these clear parts, but I didn't trust that the glass would stay fog-free over time. I also designed a set of landing legs for this beast. I created these in Tinkercad as well. While you can't see the details once attached, these legs will look like they can fold into themselves and recess into the ship for safekeeping. Finding various greebles and bits for a 1/72nd scale vessel isn't super easy, but I did find a few pieces that I thought would work. One of them is this interesting dome shape I got from a stash of bits from my stepdaughter. I decided to turn this into a high-tech timing system that each race team has on their haulers to keep track of their own ships. I also used a couple of pieces of electrical wire placed to look like cabling on this device. And of course, I needed a 3D print a front debris deflector system. This is an important piece to keep the fronts of these vessels safe while flying at high rates of speed through space. With that all in place, I primed the ship off camera with Rust-Oleum flat gray primer. This primer worked just fine for the scale of this ship. I've even used it in a few prior builds which turned out great. With the primer in place, I darkened the panel edges and lines with black Vallejo paint through my airbrush. My thought was that once the main color was on, there would be a bit of extra depth from this initial darkening of the panel lines. Don't forget to practice proper ventilation when spraying your models indoors, even when using water-based acrylics. I also gave the landing legs a coat of gunmetal color. With those painted, I turned my attention to the coats of white paint for the main section of the ship. This was also done with Vallejo white paint through my airbrush, and to be honest, I couldn't really see any of the work I did with the darkening of the panel lines, but oh well, it still looks cool with the white paint on. While I'm painting the base color in the ship, I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon members. Your kindness and generosity has helped to keep me supplied with building materials for all my ships. Thank you again, you are truly appreciated. With all the white paint in place, I masked out various parts of the vessel to get it ready for a second color. In this case, it ended up being a dark vintage-looking red color, which I thought would look close to the reddish brown on the original van in the picture this build is based off of. With the window frames painted and the reddish color in place, it was time to finally build a small racer craft. This speedy little flyer is based on the dirt super modified car in either of the two pictures from HO's racing history. I designed the shape in Tinkercad to have some rounded features and shiny flash just like the original. With all the cool stuff added in the file, I 3D printed everything and cleaned up the shapes before curing and priming it with Rust-Oleum white primer. It took a bit for my wife and I to come up with just the right color for it, but I think we got it pretty close to the original. Before adding the layer of paint to it, I made some custom paint masks on my silhouette cutter. This allowed me to add the number 21 to it, as well as a few other things. It turned out really cool. After this little racer was set aside, waiting to be permanently docked to the bigger ship, I painted the landing pad what I thought to be the proper color, and once that dried, I used more custom designed paint masks to add safety lines and other bits to the surface. I think it added a great look and added some more visual interest to the top side as well. And in case you thought we might forget, we had to make sure to add the all-important wooden heart that says love to the underside. My wife glued it in place not too far from the threaded mounting insert. Now this ship will be able to fly around the solar system with love in its heart. With all these color details added, I applied a generous coat of Vallejo Gloss Clear and let that dry, then added some decals. A couple of them are the name on the front of the ship, which is the Equus Argentium, or Silver Stallion, which is the name of a product line of automotive care products HO used to sell. Of course, no outer space racer would go flying out into the solar system without showing off all their sponsors' names. So I made a bunch of custom sponsor decals that went on the walls of the landing bay. After all these decals were in place, I took some time to add some subtle wear areas using paint dabbed with a sponge. I made sure to put it in spots that I thought would make sense for a vessel like this. Once all the decals and paint wear spots dried, I sealed them over with more gloss clear, and once that dried, I gave everything a light wash to add some depth and interest. I made this from oil paints mixed in odorless mineral spirits. This is easy to put on. You just need to dab the brush into spots and let capillary action pull the color in place. Once the mineral spirits dried, I removed any excess that didn't belong, leaving better highlighted panels and overall depth. It's always fun seeing it build at this point. After all this dried, I sprayed on a generous coat of Vallejo Matte Clear, let that dry, removed the window masking, and called this build complete. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll always know when I release new videos.